Okay, well, welcome everybody to the fourth round of Two Takes on 10 Records, and what do you call it, Jonas?
Let's talk about records or something like that. I did this SEO thing where I got some great sort of search words, so that was just what I went for. I regret it now, but yeah, I mean, it sits now. So
So it's nighttime in Sweden. It's morning. Well, yes, still here in Canada and wherever you are around the world. Welcome and thank you for watching. So today we have again each chosen four records and which we share in common. So 8 records which we share in common. We're going to discuss, and we also have, as we have done recently, a bit of a surprise at the end. And this time it's going to be records which we have doubles of, and we haven't discussed which these are with each other, what records we have doubles of and why we have doubles of them, because this is one of the peculiar record collector thing where why would you have two? Well, there's a reason, right? So there we
yeah,
are. And I would also like to take this opportunity. We've resolved this whole business about Swedish people and inviting people for dinner, which apparently is all over Twitter, which my son had asked me to resolve. And Jonas, I understand from you, there's no truth to the poor treatment of children in Sweden.
no, not that I am aware of. At least, I mean, I don't know anyone who wouldn't. I mean, treat a friend of my daughter's for dinner. It's just insane. So no, there's no truth to it. I don't think so anyway.
I mean, it depends on the child. You might send some of them home.
Yeah, a rude one. Just like go home.
Yeah, yeah. Great. And so, anything? So, before we get going, anything you wanted to mention, or how's life?
No, not nothing's like that. I'm really looking forward to showing the records today. I think that we have a great lineup, very varied in genres and stuff like that. So I think we and the ones that's watching is going to have a great time.
That's great. And I just also, just for those who are people who are, and there are many people who are watching are jazz fans, 'cause Jonas is a big jazz collector, as am I. I'm lucky enough tomorrow to be interviewing Ed Michel, one of the great producers from Impulse Records, and that interview will be coming up sometime soon, which I'm pretty excited about because I get to ask him about
So
all the great stuff. So we're going to begin not with an Impulse record. We're going to begin with really a foundational electric jazz record, and I think one of the great records of all time, which is Chick Corea's Return to Forever.
yeah,
And this, I feel a lot of things about this record. I really enjoy it. And when I listen to it, I often find myself thinking, this is the direction which Miles Davis ought to have taken after he made In a Silent Way with Chick Corea, because this record has a lot in common, I think, with In a Silent Way. It's got same kind of trippy, spaced out vibe. Obviously, there's the electric instrumentation, and I think I just think this is a fantastic record. It's actually the only Return to Forever record that I really dig. The direction that he goes later on, well, it's not the only record I really dig, but I don't like so much when he gets in much more into the jazz rock stuff later on. And the lineup on here, in particular, is fantastic, right? Because you've got the husband wife duo of Airto and Flora, right, on vocals and percussion from Brazil, which adds this kind of je ne sais quoi to the whole thing. I love Chick's Fender Rhodes noodling, which it's super laid back, right? He's sort of zoning in and out. I mean, I'm wondering, there may have been some drugs taken during the making of this record, who knows? But it certainly has a very chilled out vibe. Those first 2 tracks are amazing. The sound of the record is, I mean, just typical for ECM, right? All ECM records sound great, but it's just so good. Joe Farrell, some of his best ever playing. Chick has this not hurried way of playing on this, which I think he learned from Miles. I mean, I'm assuming, well, maybe he always had that, but I don't think you could have spent time with Miles around that point and not have learned, that some empty space in the music was a good thing. Take your time, only play the notes that you feel you need to play, and so on. And the only other thing I mentioned about his Stanley Clarke's bass, he's only just emerged at this point, but if you look at his discography around this time, like he's just playing with everybody. And I actually like his playing here much more than I had some of his 70s records, like his solo stuff, like I Want to Play for You and so on. I eventually got rid of them. I just find them kind of cheesy and it's just much tighter and more interesting and funkier here, I think. Anyway, I love this record. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I love it too. It's as you said, it's one of the best records that ever has been recorded in sort of the history of jazz. And I love, I mean, ECM to me is a hit and miss, really. But this is, I mean, maybe top 5 of the ECM records that they released. Such a great sort of the sound that they produced are something of its own. It feels like that anyway. Very Nordic in its feel. I think that some of it was recorded in Germany, some was recorded in Norway, I think.
Yeah.
This I don't know about this one, but the other ECM records. So yeah, and I think you're spot on when you talk about the sort of the heritage that Corea got from Miles, because this shoots off from In a Silent Way, and it doesn't go where Bitches Brew goes. Maybe that Return to Forever later on tried to do something like that, but in a more sort of modern touch. And I think that, just as you said, it just falls flat when it gets too much Return to Forever. This is a masterpiece. Fantastic record.
I love the last track on side 1 is a very MPB, like whatever, popular music of Brazil, whatever the Portuguese acronym is. But it's even though it's written by Corea, it's very clearly heavily influenced by Airto's rhythms, right, which is bossa-ish, and by Flora's singing. I mean, that's just not a sound that American jazz musicians are going to be able to come up with. This on their own, right? This is something that's definitely imported from Brazil, and it shows up too in that great long track in the second side. Anyway,
yeah,
great record. If you don't have it, get it. It's tough to find early pressings, but and it wasn't. I think it was delayed. Its release was delayed. I read. I think for like a number.
Yeah, in the US, it was released. I have a first German press, which was released in 1972, but the US press was released in 75. If I did sort of my research correct before this, I read that. I don't understand why. Really, why would it take 3 years to put this out in the US?
I don't know.
With all the success that Miles have had, I mean, it's sort of weird
Who
thing.
knows why record labels do the things they do? You know.
No, you're right.
All right. So next up.
Okay, moving on to something completely different. Even if I think that there's like the connection here might be Brian Eno, I don't know. But when I listened to Return to Forever later today, I thought that it was a little bit like parts of it was a little bit almost ambient. Sort of very like I don't know, feels like Brian Eno was influenced by that sort of that style of jazz. Either way, we're not going to talk about Brian Eno. This is David Bowie, but he collaborated on the Berlin sort of trilogy with Brian Eno. Not on this one, I don't think so anyway, but Low from 1977, if I'm not mistaken. One of my absolute favorite albums of all time. I think this is beyond a masterpiece. Something that I don't think that even David Bowie knew what he was getting himself into. And it's sort of the perfect blend between pop and, I'm afraid to say avant-garde, but because it's not avant-garde, but we're moving into Kraut territory, aren't we? It's sort of huge influences by Neu and Kraftwerk and stuff like that. So I guess the story behind this is that David Bowie was recording and living in Los Angeles, and he went on a sort of big sort of drug habit. He was addicted to heroin, and during the time he recorded Young Americans and Station to Station. As said in an interview, he can't remember anything from the recording of Station to Station because he was drugged out all the time. So to just break free from the heroin, he moved to France with Iggy Pop and produced Iggy Pop's first solo record. And after that, they started to record this and went on to Hansa Studio in Berlin to top it off. I mean, and it's also the start of the collaboration with Tony Visconti, I think, too.
Well, Visconti had been on his very first record. Like he'd produced Space Oddity, the record, although he didn't produce the song because he hated it, strangely enough. So that's Gus Dudgeon. But then I think but you're right. I think he comes back into the picture here on this record.
I think so. But I mean, it's so far from Space Oddity that you can come. So I guess that in a way I understand why Visconti didn't like that song if this is what he preferred. But that's the thing with David Bowie, isn't it? That he has gone through every single genre that you can think of through his career. I don't know any other artist that really did his thing all the way through, but changed and his way of looking at music entirely. I don't know anyone. Maybe Miles.
Well, and he really creates two sounds, right? All along the way too, like, or maybe three even in collaboration with Eno here, right? Because he he really is responsible for the glam rock scene, right? Amongst amongst others, but you don't have glam rock without Ziggy Stardust, right? And so on. And other albums around that time. And then what shows up here too, this is a record which, like any good football match, is a game of two halves, right? Because you got the first side, which is poppier, right? But it's still kind of, you wouldn't say this is like super commercial side one, not at all, right? Although I think there's some pretty good songs on here.
Definitely, but critics hated it when it came out, or at least it like divided critics into two halves.
But the second half, and the second half is like all this ambient stuff. I will confess, I'm not as keen on the second half. I mean, I like this record, but I play the first half, the first side more than the second. But what I notice about this is that the drum sound is so what Bowie was doing all the way through, either intentionally or by other people seeing what he was doing and copying him. He's creating the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
Because the drum sound that you get here is absolutely unlike the drum sound that you have earlier in the 70s, which drums were typically recorded much less reverby earlier in this. So if you listen to like, particularly, well, actually, whether it's like soul music, like on High Records, or if you go back further to Blue Note, right? In the jazz recordings, there's not much reverb attached to the drums. They have their own natural resonance. There is all kinds of processing which happens to the drums here, and what you get is an 80s sounding drum, which I personally don't like where that goes. One of my regularly stated complaints about music is I don't like the big wet reverby sound of music in the 80s as much. I much prefer.
No, they turned it up to 11 with the sort of the reverb. Yeah. Every single drum in the 80s sounds like they are sitting and recording it in a like airplane hangar or something.
It reaches its ridiculous apex on Bruce Springsteen's what was the big Born in the USA, where every drum sounds like it's, as you say, it's an aircraft hangar. But yeah, I think this is a pretty great and pretty interesting record, and it almost feels like a kind of work in progress. It's like none of the songs on the first side, they all feel a bit unfinished to me. They're good though, and then the second side, it's just like Brian just goes nuts and David just goes with it, right? And there's some, it is again largely instrumental. You hear some murmuring, in the background, right? But yeah, it's not a record you forget easily, for sure, right? And it was totally distinct in its moment too, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, we know about what was to come with David Bowie and how he acted out like an artist, but I mean, as you said, it's not a commercial sort of record. So it's in one way, if you didn't know Bowie, it's a kind of peculiar choice to record this record. But now in hindsight, it's just super logical that he did the sort of the trilogy that he did. I love it. It's a great one, and I also read, because the cover artwork is iconic, isn't it? And it's taken from the film The Man Who Fell to Earth, but this is sort of a play on the word of low profile.
Oh yeah.
So that's why he's in profile, and also he's taking a step back from the sort of the it's called a limelight. So I didn't know that about the cover artwork.
Very dramatic cover though.
Very dramatic.
Somebody put a sticker on mine. I had to pick it off yesterday. I was so annoyed.
This is
dilemma.
Library sample, €1. So yeah,
Right.
been living with that.
Okay, so now from cocaine refugees in Europe in the mid-70s, we go to the sunny shores of Jamaica, and the soundtrack to the film The Harder They Come, which is a compilation. It's credited to, well, it says Jimmy Cliff in. This is actually art from the movie poster, which is on the cover. So this is often commonly credited to Jimmy Cliff, but he's only got a couple songs on here, one of which repeats twice, or maybe two repeat twice. Anyway, which is a bit odd. But anyway, this is obviously a reggae record, but although it's, if you want to sort of be very specific about it, there's some reggae on here, but there's also some rock steady on here as well, and Scott, like earlier sounds as well, because this is a compilation pulled together for the movie by the director of the movie, a guy called Perry Hensel, who, and because this was the first ever Jamaican-based feature film ever made. And it's a gangster movie, and Jimmy Cliff actually was he was cast in it, and he felt like, you know, there were very you know, like a lot of biographical parallels between him and the main character, and so the songs he wrote are, you know, are kind of autobiographical, like for the film and so on. But again, he just had a couple numbers for the soundtrack, so Hensel had to go and find other music to make the soundtrack, and rather than commissioning a whole bunch of new songs, he just went and picked his favorite singles from recent Jamaican history. So actually the singles that are on here, compiled on here, are over like a 5-year period from like 66 to 1971 or thereabouts. And you got a whole bunch of different stuff, right? So you have, you know, you've got like Rasta themed songs like The Rivers of Babylon, right? Which is heavily sort of Rasta lyrics. You've got a couple songs by Toots and the Maytals, which are just incredible, like Sweet and Dandy, which is fantastic, and Pressure Drop. I don't even know what the lyrics are about for Pressure Drop, but it's just one of my favorite ever tunes. Another one which is just great on here is Draw Your Brakes by Scotty, which is actually, there was a Jamaican thing in the early mid-70s of DJs, but DJs would actually chant over top of an existing single. And so this is actually the single Stop That Train by Keith and Tex, with Scotty basically rapping over top of it. And so if you go on YouTube or some other streaming service and just look for Keith and Tex, then you can hear the original track, which is incredible. It was a big rock steady hit. Stop That Train, without Scotty talking over top. Anyway, so this was like the first big reggae record, you know, internationally, before any of the individual artists like Bob Marley and the Wailers and others began, or Burning Spear or others began to make a splash. And, you know, later on, this one actually sells a lot in the UK and the US, and is one of the records that kind of starts the reggae boom. And I don't know, I've always just absolutely love this record. And every time I go back to it, I'm struck with how good these songs were, even if two of them repeat twice. On the sound,
Yeah,
on the
yeah. I
sound.
think that even two tracks are repeated twice. The harder they come, and you can get it if you really want.
And they were probably just doing like what the running order was. I don't even know. Yeah, I must confess I've never actually watched the film.
I
But
haven't seen the film. I don't know if is it a good one or you haven't seen it.
I apparently, I mean, it's as good as a 1970s Jamaican gangster film was ever going to be, right? So it probably has
Should
some
be a
work.
10.
Probably has some work. Yeah, exactly. But the sequencing of the songs is probably what it was in the film, which is probably why they repeat. Anyway,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts about it?
I love this record, man. I had this. You could find this for €1 in every single thrift store in Sweden, and I don't know if maybe you can do it still. So when I started out, like,
It's more expensive now, I think.
it's more expensive now. Okay,
I think so.
I mean, when I started out and people were talking about records, I said that get this because you can get it for next to nothing, and it may be one of the strongest A sides ever recorded. But it's not recorded; it's a compilation, as you said. but it's a masterpiece. I mean, it's a fantastic record. I only got this and Bob Marley's live record. That's those are the only reggae records I think I have in my entire collection, and this will never leave the collection. It's great.
Yeah. One other little note about this: the song "Sitting in Limbo" is
Yeah.
about the death of Leslie Kong, who was a producer, famous producer in Jamaica, and he was Jimmy Cliff's manager and producer and basically mentor. And then he dies in 1971, and at a very young age, and Cliff's career just goes in the tank as a consequence. Just FYI, that's what that one's about. So, okay, next up.
Yeah, next up, another jazz record, another pop record, or whatever you want to call this one. And I have actually listened very little to this one, and I'll tell you why. This is Dreamboat Annie with Heart from 1975, I think. And this is, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is Heart's debut record, or is, yeah, it's
Yes.
the debut record. And what a debut! I listened to it today when I was out working in the garden, on Spotify in headphones, and it's super good produced, very folky, and it's sound, and there's not really a bad song on there, is there? So a solid rock record from 1975 reminds me a little bit of the same sort of production, or the production value like that you get from the early sort of Tom Petty and Heartbreakers, but I might be out on a limb there. So yeah, I got this from a huge collection that I bought. I helped a guy actually to sell his collection, so I got a small percentage of everything that I sold. And if it didn't sell, we had a fixed price for what I could buy it for from him, and everything was in sort of almost like mint condition. So I think that the fixed price was, I put it out for like €5, and if it didn't sell for €5, I could buy it for €2.50 or something like that. So this is an original press on mushroom, in great condition. So I'm super happy with. So what's your take on this? It has some Canadian.
It does indeed.
Yeah.
It was recorded. So it was recorded at Mushroom Sound, which was a little studio in Vancouver.
Okay.
The Wilson sisters end up moving up to Vancouver because there's a bit of U.S. draft dodging involved, and one of the people they were involved with, the two sisters were with two brothers called Fisher, one of whom is Roger, I think, is on the record, guitarist. I think that's right. And I think when I reviewed this record, which was one of the very first videos I ever did, I got some of the biographical information wrong. I think I got the wrong Fisher brother with the wrong Wilson sister. Anyway, I was corrected because this is the way of the internet, and rightly so. And so they end up basically being based out of Vancouver, sort of 73, 74, thereabouts. They eventually fell out with Mushroom Records because this photo shoot, with various sort of versions of them with the Wilson sisters not looking like they're wearing very much, and they eventually do. The record company does for their next record does a newspaper advertisement with the same kind of look, with them looking like they're not wearing clothes. Um, with a tagline like "This wasn't our first time" or something like that, basically suggesting they were like some sort of like lesbian incest thing. Anyway, they're totally pissed off, and their relationship with the label blows up, understandably. And but this, you're right. I think absolutely the sound on this is incredible. That A side is one of the great A sides in rock and roll history, right? Like Magic Man, Crazy on You, Dreamboat Annie, right? They're all like three of the greatest songs they ever did. What a way to announce themselves. I think the second side, I don't know, the string section was that good of an idea. I think it doesn't quite run out of gas because this is a great record, but it's not as strong. But that first side, I play over and over again, and the like just that guitar break in Magic Man, right? The little which is anyway, it's just one of the great guitar breaks, and then that sort of very 70s synthy sound and all the rest of it. These guys were Zeppelin's favorite band at one point.
Yeah.
They had a kind of
You mentioned it. I've read something about it.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I listen to this again and again. So yeah, if you don't know this one, I mean, the first four Heart records are super, and then after that, then they had their kind of hair metal remake in the '80s, and I lose interest. But
I saw that they went their different ways and did solo work in the mid 2000s, something like that, like 2005, 2007. But I haven't heard those at all.
They're kind of on the outs at the moment, here and there. These things happen, right? It's just like like the Davies brothers and so on. It's hard to keep siblings together in a band forever and ever, right? So
yeah, for obvious reasons, but their voices are fantastic. So I was wondering if it held up for the sort of the solo careers, but I've never heard about their solo careers, so maybe it wasn't the best sort of career choice to go solo.
It did. They toured a few years ago as Heart, with Jason Bonham drumming.
Okay, cool.
And they did Zeppelin songs and Heart songs, which is a tour I missed.
Shit.
My wife went to it, and which is just a bone of contention, and I'm just upset that I missed that. But she saw it. But anyway, she said it was fantastic. So
imagine.
Okay, so now let's get back into some jazz. And so the record we're going to talk about. Finally, exactly.
Yeah.
So sorry about the dog. We have a husky cross here, Canada's loudest dog. He's now currently barking at a turkey vulture flying overhead.
Okay.
So what we're going to talk about here is Les McCann and Eddie Harris's record, Swiss Movement, which, as it says here, was recorded live at the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland in 1969. And this is an interesting record because the way it comes about is that they're both playing the festival. I mean, they're friends. They're both playing the festival, and I guess one night in the bar they decide, hey, we should add an extra gig and here at the festival and play together. So they do, and the festival organizers, have their Ampex tape machine with a couple microphones and press record and record the gig. And nobody thinks much of it. And then eventually Atlantic Records buys the tapes for $100 from.
No way. For $100?
For $100 or less than, I think. Something, anyway, not much money. Certainly not much money. And releases this as a record. And it's a huge hit. And nicely too for these guys, they were playing a lot of originals, right? So they're also getting royalties as well. So again, the whole thing's pulled together, spur of the moment, and it has that kind of feel. It has a very spontaneous feel. It sounds amazing, given that it was just recorded spur of the moment. It's a wonderful live recording. It has, I think, the only non-original on here is, that is to say, the only song which is not written by either McCann or Harris is Compared to What by Gene McDaniels. But this I think has the definitive version of compared to what Roberta Flack also does this. It's a kind of a late 60s civil rights standard, basically, right? Soul jazz civil rights standard. But this, I think, is the definitive version of that song. Which is a leadoff song, which is fantastic. They also have this guy Benny Bailey, who I don't know much more about. Apparently, it says somewhere in the liner notes, somewhere he was living in Europe at the time. He's an American guy.
Yep.
Plays
I
some.
think he did one record in Sweden actually that is sort of hard to find with Swedish musicians.
But I mean, he plays some smoking trumpet on this. It's so good. And Harris, of course, the electrifying Eddie Harris, is great. Is on the last track of side one, Kathleen's theme. His sax solo there is remarkable, and then the whole second side swings so hard with that gospel-y sounding track, which was you got it in your soulness, and then there's a very driving hard bop track, which is the second part of the side. Anyway, the whole record just swings. It is great. It's just a lot of spontaneous energy to it. So I love it.
Yeah, me too, definitely. And it's not a expensive record to get nowadays too. So maybe a little bit of a cheap heat if you want to sort of label it.
You can get it for $10. Yeah, probably about 10.
But I think it's a great one. I also read somewhere that on Eugene McDaniel's Outlaw record, which I think came in 71 or 72, that he thanks Les McCann, and I don't know if he does one of his songs on there too, but and that's also on Atlantic. So I don't know if he had some, like, maybe the song on here financed that. I have no idea. I'm just theorizing now, but
because that was he must have made some decent money off it.
Yeah, it feels like that anyway. Like, and so I guess that a year or two afterwards, when he started to make Outlaw, and then he did the Headless Heroes of the Apocalypse, which is a fantastic record, both on Atlantic, both equally good, I should say. I mean, maybe it has something to do with this one. I don't know, but this is magnificent, and as you say, it sounds good. It's tight. The musicians are tight, so I could never in my world guess that this wasn't planned way beforehand. So that was a cool info. So yeah, great one.
All right. Okay, next up.
Next up, we have, and this is going to be maybe sort of controversial, because this is a record I don't like, and it's falling out of the sleeve. This is Johnny Cash at San Quentin. I think this was released in 1969. Maybe I have that wrong. I don't know. No, 69. And it's part of the sort of the prison records that he did from maybe 68 to 76 or something like that. This is the only reason I have this in my collection, because I don't think that this is a good record, but that also is, I don't really listen that much to Johnny Cash, because I think that most of it sounds the same. Like, every song just sounds the same. I'm sorry, but I think it does. I mean, if you're a great fan,
we may get some hate mail for this now.
I will get some hate mail. I guess so, but I don't care. I mean, it's just opinions, really. I'm kidding. And everyone is entitled to their opinion. The stuff he did with the sort of going to the prisons to do performance, it's market-wise, it's a great thing to like add to the sort of the bad boy kind of vibe that he already had. Mm-hmm. But it's good recorded, famous songs. I don't know what to say, really. This is my dad's copy. My dad was or is a pretty big Johnny Cash fan. So when I got his records, this was in there. That's the only reason why I keep this, because every time I've looked through my Johnny Cash collection and those records come up, I don't have the stomach to or the heart to really sell them. And I actually bought the first 4 American Recordings records because those, I think, are fantastic. When the older Johnny Cash, and the voice, the fragile voice that he that he has, and those sort of performances that he delivers are great. But I don't know. I feel that Rick Rubin has as much to do with those than Johnny Cash. So that's my opinion. He did a record at Öståker in Sweden. So of the 4 records that he released on LP, I think that one from 1973 or 74 or something like that is from the penitentiary here in Sweden called Öståker.
Oh, really?
That's not a good record.
Yeah, I didn't know he did a Swedish prison record. So
yeah, he did. But that just, no one bought that because he's not playing any of his sort of famous tunes.
Right.
He's playing some of the new stuff that he had in the 70s, and he wasn't that popular in the 70s, if I remember correctly with stuff that I read. But he did 2 Chris Christopherson covers, which is okay. So Me and Bobby McKee and Sunday Morning Coming Down, I think.
Right.
But what's your opinion on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm of 2 minds about Johnny Cash too. You know, like I do enjoy his stuff, but I dip into it. I don't often like a whole record of Johnny Cash, but I do love listening to a song here and there, right? Yeah. So yeah, I'm no Johnny Cash completist. I will say that, and I don't think this is as good a record as Folsom Prison, which if you're comparing, you know, prison records, and I would say he's got a fair amount of cred when it comes to the prison stuff, because there was an undercurrent of Johnny Cash of, you know, countries can be kind of a reactionary environment. It's not necessarily music you would associate with progressive social movements and such, right? No, in general. But there are obviously some exceptions, and Cash is one of those exceptions. And if you look at around the same time, he's got a TV series. Yeah. And the kinds of people that he's showing on his TV series were kind of, you can argue he's trying to broaden the minds of his country audience, you know, a little bit too. So, and I'm not saying everyone listens to country as closed minds, just to be clear, but clearly, you know, I think he's going to these prisons not just to sell records. I think he's going because he genuinely feels there are a lot of people in the American justice system who get put in jail who don't deserve to be in jail because it's harsh and cruel system, as we know, right? So all that said,
maybe I was a little bit unfair there.
No. It's a reasonable discussion to have, but I think it's not as good as Folsom Prison. He does sound a little bit weary, as people say on this record, and I think it's true. There's the one thing I did read about this, which is quite amusing, is I guess the famous photograph of him, you know, giving the middle finger to the camera, actually comes from this concert. Goddamn dog! Can you be quiet? You, yes, you. Canada's loudest dog. Anyway,
no problem.
So it's a real problem. Yeah, never buy a husky, everybody. So they're relentless.
I have a 7-year-old daughter. I know all about it.
So so I think it feels a little bit like it's lacking energy, and maybe he's tired, and who knows. But so yeah, just okay. I think, as you know, I like to keep the same number of records in my collection. So this may be one that goes out when something else comes in, you know.
Yeah. Just to start another discussion, maybe, is that I love Johnny Cash as a person and as an artist. I think his career is super interesting, and he has made a lot of records and made a lot of enjoyment to a lot of people. I mean, so. And that's the thing with music, isn't it? That you have to divide sort of the interest and if you like the music, but you can. I don't listen to country music, but I love the country music movement. Just as I don't listen to Norwegian black metal, but I'm so fascinated, and I read everything I can about Norwegian black metal, because what drives this and sort of the political climate in Norway too, but I don't listen to it. I don't enjoy the music. So yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that there's a difference between liking the music and being fascinated of the artist and the music.
Yeah. This record also has A Boy Named Sue, which was a
Okay.
novelty hit in the 70s as well, later on, because it got included in a bunch of KTEL compilations. And do you know what? Do you, actually, maybe that's a cultural reference. Do you know, does KTEL mean anything to you? KTEL
Oh,
Records? Oh,
no.
okay. No, it was a kind of a, like in, it was like an infomercial style of record company, I think based out of Winnipeg, but they would sell rather cheapo, you know, 15 tracks all on one side of an LP compilations of
Okay.
novel records and you know top hits of 1975 and disco hits, but they would be sold on TV like sort of not available at any stores. Phone now, get your
Okay.
copy of such and such. Anyway, so KTEL is kind of a byword for cheap and nasty record.
Ah, okay.
Anyway, there you go. There's a piece of North Americana for you. So, all
Thank
right.
you.
So now, is it my turn now? I think it
Yep.
is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to talk about, so from the not quite ridiculous, but from the gritty to the avant-garde, Ornette Coleman's Change of the Century. And I
Yeah.
have, our covers look different. I have a British pressing. This is a London Records stereo release from like whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think it's the first English pressing, so like 1961 or 60 or something like that, whenever it is.
Yeah, I think that this is a US sort of late 70s, maybe.
Yeah, and I just love. So speaking of its plastic, I just love the cover photo on this. I think it's absolutely absolutely you know an epic piece of art. Um, anyway, so this is Ornette with his plastic alto sax. A year or two after having taken New York by storm at the so-called Battle of the Five Spot, right? When he and Charlie Hayden and Billy Higgins and Don Cherry show up at the Five Spot, and maybe it was Blackwell. No, I think it was Higgins. Anyway, um, and blow everyone's minds and piss everybody off for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
right? And so on. An amazing quartet. I mean, Higgins is a great drummer, but he's playing here with three absolute legends of jazz, right? Coleman,
Yeah.
Don Cherry, and Charlie Hayden, and all those three guys have incredible careers of their own. In addition to being here, you know, in still in these this foundational earthquake of free jazz. And for me, the key person on here is actually Charlie Hayden. So
Mhm.
the first couple of records that Coleman makes for contemporary records when he's just getting started out in
Yeah.
LA are he doesn't actually have Charlie Hayden playing bass. It's Don Payne and Percy Heath. They're on those two records. But Hayden is already part of his mix. He's just not in the studio making those records, but he's already jamming with Hayden. And Hayden basically comes up to him at some point at a gig and says, "Man, you sounded fantastic." And Coleman says, "No one ever tells me that." Right. And then they go off to because you know, because he was freaking everybody out, and they go off to Coleman's house, and they basically stay there for weeks just jamming. And Hayden says, you know, when I went into Coleman's house, like literally there were pieces of music like everywhere, like just all over the place. And so they did all they did was jam. And what's happening here, what Hayden says about this record, which is I happen to know this stuff because I'm about to do Hayden's record Closeness, so I've on my channel, so I've been reading up about it. But what Hayden says about this record is that this is the record where Coleman finally really abandons having any changes at all written down on the charts for his musicians.
Okay.
You just play, and what Hayden would basically, Coleman and Cherry would both just play without reference to any chord changes or sequence or any kind, notation. And what Hayden would do, because Hayden grew up as playing country music, he had a family band, the Hayden family, in somewhere in the Midwest, and they basically were on TV and radio and stuff and playing country music, and he was the bass player for his family, and he sang and stuff too. And
Mm.
and so he had this country and blues background, and so he would just listen for whatever sort of root note he felt Coleman was using at the time. And then he would just play off of that, right?
Mm.
Or whatever chair. And so he would just find whatever the natural root was of whatever they were doing in their solo. And then he would just play off that. And so what you get is a record which um, is almost entirely unmoored to chord changes. And yet, because of Hayden's playing, still is in many passages seems recognizably like hard bop, which is kind of, not everywhere, right? Some places are, some songs here are like the title track are way out there, right? But otherwise, it Hayden provides this. So here's a guy who provides something kind of recognizable and familiar, but yet is able to follow these guys when they go wherever they're going, which is, frankly, I mean, superhuman as an effort. So I think I think it sounds fantastic. You wouldn't necessarily call it a super accessible record, but if you're willing to give Coleman a shot, this is one of his very, very best early ones. Technically, like Coleman and Cherry and their sort of joint side by side riffing they do, a lot of it is incredible. So yeah, very enjoyable, super interesting record musically as well. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's I agree, totally agree. And I listened to this today because I couldn't really remember, because the only Ornette Coleman record that I really know by heart is The Shape of Just to Come, obviously, like everyone else. But I think that the first records there around Shape of Just to Come is all fantastic. Every time I put them on, I don't know why I often play The Shape of Just to Come. This is like maybe even more interesting than The Shape of Just to Come, because you know that by now. But this is it surprises me a little bit more when I play it. It's great, and I read that The Shape of Just Come was recorded in March 1959 and released in November 1959. This was recorded in October 1959. So this is recorded before The Shape of Just Come was released, and that record, I mean, changed jazz. But maybe I'm wrong here.
Well, I don't know. Well, no, you may be right. I mean, certainly it had to have been recorded after Hayden had joined the band, right? And he only really starts to appear with the band when they moved to New York. But they moved to New York in the fall of '59, so maybe it's recorded exactly around then. Anyway,
yeah, maybe I read about the wrong record. Maybe you shouldn't take me.
Well, it's around that time, right? It's around that time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think release-wise, isn't this the record that came after The Shape of Just to Come in chronological order?
Yeah, it may well be. I don't quite.
I mean, like a follow-up to that sort of iconic record, and I mean, Shape of Just to Come must have made a huge mark on music right from the get-go. So following that up had to be a humongous task.
Jazz World was so parochial, right? Like he was recording out in LA, right? As far as all the big East Coast labels and people were concerned, the stuff in LA was like cool jazz, West Coast jazz. It was all those white guys out there doing that stuff. They didn't pay that much attention. They go out there and gig, but that was basically it. But it was when these guys come to New York and play in Greenwich Village, right? Yeah. That's when everyone starts to notice. So those first two records of contemporary didn't get noticed much in like Downbeat and stuff like that. It's when he arrives with Hayden in New York. Anyway, but for me it's like the difference between when Hayden joins the band. I think he then goes to another level because he is just so good and just a remarkable performer.
Yeah, definitely. And what a career he had. I almost saw Ornette Coleman in concert. We went to it was a festival, and we went to the festival. We had tickets and everything, and we was just going to go inside, and they announced that he was sick, so he couldn't perform. So I think that we managed to sell our tickets outside because there were a lot of bands playing. And I never got the opportunity to see him again, and now he died a few years ago, I think. So that was a shame. I don't know how he performed in his later sort of days, but it would be cool to have seen him perform.
I agree. Alrighty, next up.
My like sort of the last one of the Ordinary records. And this is a favorite. of mine, and I just started to get into Horace Silver. I have sort of discovered Horace Silver maybe a little bit this year. I have heard this and some records with him before, but didn't really take notice. But now, since the sort of the Blue Note classics reissues and stuff like that, putting out 6 pieces of silver, and I got a original press of Blowing the Blues Away, so I've sort of uh, made myself get into his catalog a little bit. But this is what a record.
Yeah.
Man, 1965, I think this was recorded. I have a French 1982 reissue of this, which I think sounds pretty good, actually. These sort of Pate Marconi, they are cheap.
Yeah.
I think they are cheaper than buying a new reissue of the sort of 75th anniversary or something like that, but they sound better in my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I have a very strange one. This one is,
yeah. What's that?
This is like it's off a very weird label, Jazz Heritage. It's like 1984. I think it's that sort of time when everybody decided jazz was basically a museum piece, right? And so this is like so this was some weird label that did sort of archival releases of what were presumed at that point to be long dead and buried, musical things for kind of, for sort of to put in your university recording library kind of thing. So yeah, it's just incredibly cheap looking black and white. I keep meaning to replace it, but I never have, because the sound is actually quite good on this record.
Okay. It feels like they did a black and white just to add to the sort of the museum piece-ness of it.
I didn't know. I think they've only subtracted. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Go on with your
discussion. No. I think I'm done there, because I don't know that much about Horace Silver. I think that the year, like last year was the year of Monk for me, and maybe this year is going to be the year of the Horace. Maybe I don't know, but I feel like I'm digging into his catalog, and I feel like I'm on the verge of getting like sort of autobiography or something like that with him or about him.
He's an amazing artist, right? Like, excuse me. Here we go. I can edit that out. He's an amazing artist. He is. I mean, first of all, he's part of the original Jazz Messengers, right? Before Blakey ends up taking it over. He leaves because he doesn't like the whole heroin scene, because he's a pretty clean living guy, very very solid guy actually. Horace Silver, always treated his band members well liked as a in the community, and then of course he puts out a series of phenomenal, very bluesy oriented, becoming ultimately soul jazz stuff on Blue Note, right? So a lot of great Blue Notes. Yeah. And in the 60s, right? And then his 70s. Now this to me is where I'm going now with Horace Silver, because his 70s output is it's very funky. It's quite exploratory. There's a have you heard United States of Mind, that record from like 1970, 71? There's two versions, like volume 1 and volume 2.
Okay.
It's got Andy Bay, the singer, on it. So Gary Bartz had this project, Harlem Bush Music, which is great, and Andy Bay is a singer on that. But he also guests with Horace Silver on United States of Mind. That is a very cool record, very cool cover too. Okay. But this record, so I mean, really, it's one of the great hard bop Blue Note releases, right? Yeah. It's like if you were going to say you can only take 10 Blue Notes with you, right? This would be one. I think this would be one of the 10. And it is so accessible. It's also very much, you can tell he's writing the theme, because the first 4 tracks he's got a kind of this is a music nerd thing, but it's kind of a 1/5 sort of bass motif that he's using, that but that motif reappears in different ways, and so slightly different versions of that through the first 4 tracks. So there's a really sense of sort of compositional unity through this record as well, and it's but it's also one of the last big hits for Blue Note, right? Because after this, they start to go, as Wolf and Lion start to exit the scene for one reason or another. um, they kind of lose their way in terms of the classic hard bop sound that starts to disappear. So this is one of the last great hurrahs of the Blue Note sound. But it's frankly a record that should be in everybody's jazz collection.
Yeah, I agree.
And you can play it for anybody if they don't like jazz, because it's that accessible, that good, that rhythmic. I think it's just super. So
I actually played it in the car today, and even my wife, who's not she's a jazz fan, but she's not like she doesn't read up on jazz, and even she said like even I know about this
she
song.
doesn't read up on jazz. What's wrong with her?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm trying to teach her, but yeah, she doesn't listen.
Okay, so now we're at surprises now, aren't we? So whose turn is it? My turn or your turn? Is it my turn?
Let's say it's your turn, because I did song for my father. So
okay, so again, the idea here was, because we were both collectors and vinyl nerds. So I knew that I had some records I had doubles of, and I knew why I had doubles of those records, and I figured you would have as well. And sure enough, you do. Okay, so this is the record I have. And we both decided to cheat and do two. So
exactly.
We have a bonus round today. So my record, of which I have two, is AC/DC's Power It. And the reason I have two versions of this is actually, there's a reason for that. And so if you can see, but whoops, hang on, get my fingers out of the way. So the track listing is different. So there is, so just to be clear, so this is the original UK/European release, which was rushed out in time for a tour, because they were struggling a bit still as a band at this point. And they had not really become what they would become in the public imagination. They were still trying to get a niche. They'd been fired from another tour, I forget with whom, but things weren't going that well. So this is the one, the original UK release does not have Rock and Roll Damnation on it, which is a bit of a drag, because that is probably one of my three favorite AC/DC songs. I love that song. Does have another great song, however. Cold Hearted Man is on this. So and the running order is a little bit different as well. So it kicks off with Give Me a Bullet, for instance. So it has a song, Cold Hearted Man, which doesn't occur on the other one. The other reason to get this pressed, and I would actually say the primary reason to get the first European releases, is that the mix is better. It's just got so much more oomph. I mean, there's nothing more annoying than having a hard rock or heavy metal record that doesn't sound heavy. That sounds tinny and light and so on. And this is absolutely one of the most satisfying hard rock experiences you can have. Listening to Riff Raff on this release is like an out of body experience, right? So this is great. So this is the American press, and this has Rock and Roll Damnation. It's like again, you can see it kicks off with Rock and Roll Damnation. Give Me a Bullet is now the third track, and so on. There's a couple other differences as well too. The mix isn't as good, I should say, but it's kicked in the teeth. There are slightly different versions here. There's different intro to that and so on. Anyway, and lastly to say, and this is that if you delve into the world of AC/DC fandom, most sort of hardcore, real AC/DC fans would probably have this as their number one or number two AC/DC record. It's gotten that kind of cred. That's not as quite as niche an AC/DC opinion as the other niche AC/DC opinion, which is that Flick of the Switch is actually the second best record they ever did with Brian Johnson. But that's a topic for another day. So
okay, we'll do a AC/DC themed session next time.
Actually, that would be fun. We should do that.
Yeah, I haven't listened to AC/DC that much. I had the live record from the 90s on CD that I played a lot, and I enjoyed that. But other than that, it's a sort of anonymous band for me.
Oh yeah, there you go.
No, um, it's like this. I don't have much doubles in my collection because I'm mental. I'm always searching for records, and if I know that I have two of the same record and I don't have time to play that much of one of the records, I'm selling them to get another piece of vinyl into the collection. So that's like the philosophy I have. With Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Yet to Come, just to give you an example, I had a reissue from the 2000s, and I managed to find an early 70s reissue, and I sold the reissue. The same goes with Velvet Underground. I had a really good sounding sort of, I think it was maybe mid 70s Japanese press that sounded fantastic. Got a very early sort of unpeeled banana German press.
Wow.
So as close as that to the original Andy Warhol cover that I will ever come, I think. So one could say, or would say, maybe that I should keep the Japanese just to listen to, and I mean the other one just to have, but I'm not that sort of collector. So I sold the Japanese one so I could get
Right.
another record in my collection. But
Right.
there's some that I've kept, and often it's the reason is because it adds something more to the original record, and this is one of them. So
Okay.
this is a original first US press in fantastic condition of A Love Supreme, that I got some years ago. One of my prized possessions in my collection, and before that I bought this. This is A Love Supreme, the complete masters 3 LP set. So
Okay.
here you get the entire sort of sessions with 6 sides, and these have the Rashid Ali sessions that he did.
Yeah.
Rashid Ali and
Archie Shepp too, right?
Archie Shepp, yeah,
Yeah.
which is fantastic. And I have dabbled if I should sell this just to get some money for what I gave for this, you know the deal. But
Yeah.
always when I have my sort of my purges from purging the collection and selling stuff, picking stuff out, and like when I come to this, I just like, nope, this doesn't leave the
Because
collection.
even Train was, even in the liner notes to the original release, he's basically apologetic, about the great work those other guys did and couldn't be released, and it didn't make the final cut. Why they didn't release a double album? Why? I guess it was. Yeah, well, I can understand why. It's a concept piece, really, right? And it was just
Exactly.
had to be those 4 tracks, but.
And I mean, they are playing their heart out. The sort of the original quartet, is it? So it's like 2 records really on this. It feels like that anyway, and the sound quality is fantastic also. So that's why I have doubles of A Love
Yeah, well,
Supreme.
no, I get that. Well, and that's, I mean, and really, so there's a theme here for both of us. I don't give a damn about this cover or that cover. It's about the
Nope.
music. If there's a musical reason to have a double, and that's my rationale for my next one as well, which is that so I this is the box set of The Song Remains the Same, which of course is the classic Zeppelin live release from well, it's actually recorded in the summer of '73, but it's released in the summer of '76 because it takes them forever to get the film done. And because they didn't get enough footage, so they had to go back and shoot some footage in a soundstage. If you watch the film, half of it is actually shot in a soundstage, trying to look like Madison Square Garden. They do a fair job of it, but anyway. But you can tell because John Paul Jones is wearing different clothes and has different hair, supposedly at different points. So he was the only guy who refused to sort of dress up like he dressed up in '73. So anyway, it's kind of funny. This is obviously the box set. It's 4 LPs. It includes a bunch of tracks from the original concerts. Famously, of course, this was pulled together from the 3 different nights of concert and sort of blended into be as if it were one concert. So this has got a bunch of other tracks that were not on the original release. and which is great. So I had the original release, and then this became my go-to one, and it sounds pretty darn good. But I then elected to go back and get another copy of the original release because, which is which is here, which is just a double album, and the reason is because Jimmy Page, in his ever dwindling or in his constant noodling and fiddling with the recorded legacy of Led Zeppelin, can never leave well enough alone.
Okay.
And for me, having listened to, I actually have all 300 some whatever Zeppelin bootlegs of all their concerts, like on digital. Like I've got literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours of Zeppelin on digital, and I've listened to most of it, which was a journey. But I'm a huge fan of the different versions of Dazed and Confused, because they would do all these medleys, and it would always change. It would always be a bit different, which was kind of interesting. And the version of Dazed and Confused on the original release, which obviously is the same song and the same night and the same version of the song, only it's longer on this one. Some of it's been edited out on the box set, and it's my favorite track on this whole thing. And so, well, I can't have that. If I want to listen to that, which is one of my favorite live track of theirs from any of their releases, I want the version that I like. I don't like the bits that are, I don't like having bits missing. So this is why I have the second one. So occupying another whatever 8 million.
Yeah, I understand, but that's a
else. So that's
great explanation for the insanity.
That's my story. Yeah, exactly. That's my story. I'm a huge Zeppelin nerd. So that's the problem. So
okay,
forced to do that. So
that's cool. I don't have that in my collection actually. Have most Zeppelin, I think, of the sort of the stuff that they put up, but
well, it's good. It takes a while if you haven't listened to much live Zeppelin. It takes a while to get used to the vagaries of that. And that Plant would never warm his voice up, so he's always rough at the beginning of concert, but by the time you get in the middle of the concert, it's amazing. So yeah. Anyway, that's a whole another episode we could do. But
a Zeppelin themed episode. No, we're going to top this session out with a very obscure Swedish prog record. I mean, oh why, God, why? But it's actually I need to show this because this is an original press of Älgarnas trädgård, a very sort of sought after, famous Swedish. Yeah, it's a fantastic.
That's so cool. Cover. Yeah. What is the image exactly? Is it art? Is it drawn art, or is it a photograph? Or?
I think so. I'll show you the double, because that's without ring wear and stuff like that. I think skipping ahead now, this drawing, I think it's a drawing, is in a basement in Gothenburg on a wall. So someone told me that they was like down there and saw this original artwork from that. Älgarnas trädgård is, I mean, Älgarnas trädgård and Anna själv tredje, another record, is the closest we get to krautrock here in Sweden, in my opinion. This is a little bit more cosmic, but as I said, sought after Swedish prog record.
When's
a lot of site nerds are looking for this one, the original on Silence Records.
When was it released? When was it released?
1971, I think. Should know. I think it's 71 or 72.
So why do you have two?
Yeah, I have two because it's a iconic sort of Swedish psych record, and you see it's not the best sort of shape, but 2000 and maybe 15, 15, Subliminal Sounds released this as a double LP. So the second LP is live material, actually.
Okay.
So it's live material from 1971. And I mean, these guys are sort of like, I don't know, Grateful Dead, maybe a bunch of hippie dudes, like tripped out.
Can you hold up? Can you hold up the name of the band again? There, what was on the?
Yeah, Älgarnas trädgård, the Garden of the Mooses.
Okay.
Doesn't get more Swedish than that,
Yeah.
or than
That's awesome.
And I'll translate the song titles here. The first title is called 2 Hours Over 2 Blue Mountains with a cuckoo. Is that the bird?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cuckoo on either side on the hours about. That's the first song. The second song is called There's Always Time for Everything. There's always the time when time meets. That's the second song. So yeah, it's
LSD is a powerful drug.
they only did one record, and I think that the live material on the second disc is very, very unique. I don't think that they really ever sort of re-emerged and played together after this period.
So did anybody from that band go on to greater things? Were they known?
I think
for
so, but I actually none of them, to me at least, are one of the sort of famous proggers. So I can't really say any of the names of the band members, but I think that surely most of them went on to do stuff afterwards, which is like on the Silence label. A lot of the sort of the people on that label went on to do other stuff like that. So Bo Hanson is one with Lord of the Rings, and there were some other singer-songwriters like Turid, for example. But that's now we're deep into the sort of the Swedish psych and prog from late 60s, early 70s. So that's why I have those duplicates. I also have Signwinder with Lee Morgan. I have a stereo first press original Blue Note, and the reissue that was put out last year. Yeah, I think last year, the Kevin Gray remastered. And I can't sell the Kevin Gray one that I bought because it sounds that good.
Yeah, I know. Those are
the original out of the water, but it's, I mean, my gut feeling when it comes to collecting records, I want as close to the original source as I can get.
Yeah.
And
I used to say, why do people bother chasing down old mono pressings? And now I totally get it. I'm so tired of that hard left pan that on a lot of the Coltrane records, for instance, which I find is very, very distracting. So, okay, well, that was really fun, and so round 4 in the books, and looking forward to round 5. And best of luck with your channel. It's been a great year for both of our channels, and so thanks. Well, to all our viewers for sticking with us. And again, love the comments, love the suggestions. If anybody out there viewing has an idea for a little twist we can do as we do more of these, please do let us know in the comments. Jonas, any last thoughts?
No, you summed it up perfectly. It was a great session. I love these. I mean, it's just like every time you're right. If we should do on this weekend, it's just like Christmas, because you get to dive into the collection, and I love the sort of the conversations that we get going. I think it's great.
Yeah, it's good. And I'm sorry everybody about the dog, but again, don't buy a husky. Okay, thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.